Welcome to the walkthrough of frequently made mistakes for assignment 4A. First, please make sure you document your code thoroughly. And second, please make sure you run all the unit and integration tests and make sure if those tests don't all pass that you come to office hours to get help or post your questions to Piazza. Let's now come down and take a look at some problems that we saw in various methods in the code. This is a problem that exists in the being blocker block method. Please make sure you call the right method on the exit barrier, not the await method. You do not want to be calling await. You want to call a different method on that. That's a CountDownLatch, by the way. Now let's turn our attention to the other class, the ForkJoin class. In this case, the new being factor method should just be nice and simple. It should be return new being blocker this, as opposed to allocating a new being blocker and then returning that local variable. You don't need to do that. It's just additional extra verbosity that's not buying you anything. Let's now take a look at some problems with initialized barriers. So first, we're having the wrong count passed in to the cyclic barrier. This is kind of the entry barrier. That needs to be a different count. You need to think carefully about how many threads you need for that. And down here, interestingly enough, it's also passing in the wrong count, except this time to the constructor of CountDownLatch. And you have to think about how many times you want to count things down. So those are two counts you need to get correct. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the for each loop that's being used here. So please get in the habit of using the for each method instead of the for each loop. And secondly, please make sure you call the setter method on being blocker rather than accessing the fields directly. The reason you want to use a for each method instead of a for each loop is it's just a bit more functional. It's good to get in the habit of using functional programming. The bulk of the problems that occurred in this assignment were process all beings. So here's one of the problems. Please get in the habit of using the rethrow runnable adapter method here, thereby eliminating the need for the try-catch block. It's really ugly to put try-catch blocks in functional code like this, so you can get rid of that. Let's take a look at another problem in process all beings. In this case, you need to make sure that you're calling execute in order to provide the code to run in a worker thread in the common ForkJoinPool. So that needs to be fixed. And also, please use the rethrow runnable adapter method to eliminate the need for the try-catch block. Let's come down here. Here's process all beings, where here it's important, as we saw before with initialized barriers, to use the for each method instead of the for each loop. You'll see that a couple times below. People kept doing that. So please use the for each method, not the for each loop. And this code also is not using the common ForkJoinPool mechanisms like execute. So please watch the video at this link and/or review the example code EX33, which is what this video shows, to see how to structure this code to use execute properly. Coming down to yet another problem with process all beings, in addition to using the for each method instead of a for each loop, please make sure that you pass the right parameter to execute. The wrong parameter is being passed here. And instead of what's shown here, which is passing in the block method, instead you should use a lambda expression and call the ForkJoinPool manage block method from within execute. Similar problem here, just structured a little differently. Once again, the wrong parameter is being passed to execute below. You don't want to be passing in gazing iterations. Instead, you want to use a lambda expression that should call ForkJoinPool manage block within execute, all wrapped up inside a rethrow runnable, of course. And don't put this rethrow runnable after the call to execute. That needs to be in the call to execute. And another problem with this particular method is the countdown method is being called on the exit barrier at this point, and that's the wrong method to call. You want to call a different method. So here we are, finally, the last common mistake I saw. This is almost right, but in this case, you need to make sure that a lambda expression is being passed to rethrow runnable. And right now, it's calling manage block, and what you want to do is actually have that be a runnable that will be called in the appropriate context, which is, of course, in a worker thread in the common ForkJoinPool. So this code is ever so close to being right, but it needs to be tweaked just a tad. So that's a summary of the frequently made mistakes that I saw when I reviewed assignment 4A. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to come to office hours and/or post these questions to Piazza.